Develop though still across western parts of Scotland, but otherwise plenty of clear spells. Temperatures ranging from 8 to 11 degrees, but could feel a little bit chilly in the countryside, especially in the north. So for many, Monday starts fine, dry and bright. Plenty of sunshine on offer, and it stays that way through much of the day. Some showers will bubble up, but the sunshine will be turning increasingly hazy across Northern Ireland and Scotland, with the winds increasing here too, ahead of the next area of low pressure. So cool in the north, but in the sunshine, highs of up to 22 degrees. Bye-bye for now.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
What do we learn in the letter that Stoker thought about Dracula?
So the letter was sent 6 weeks after Dracula's publication in July 1897. So at this point, it's not, Dracula that we know of now, this sort of almost cultural myth. It's a new and uncertain work, which had been reviewed incredibly mixed. Some said it was amazing, some said it was weird and quite strange. In the letter, Stoker sent out a number of first editions to friends, and one actually went to Prime Minister Gladstone as well, basically asking for praise and also asking, here is a signed first edition for you, please let me know what you think of it. Most are very formal. They would just be like, enclosed as first edition. With this one, it is to an unidentified Williams, we believe a sort of a friend from the theatre circle, but still yet to be identified, in which he encloses the book, signs the book to him, states, how is enclosed for high, which is a very informal way of saying how is enclosed for kind of, this is high watermark, it's amazing writing. And then, Lord forgive me, I am quite shameless, which is...
How do you interpret that?
There are two interpretations. One is he's shameless for asking a friend his thoughts, which I don't believe. The other is, Lord forgive me, I am quite shameless. Dracula was a weird, very strange book, and still is to this day. And I think it was Stoker, in a very cheeky and quite conversational way, being like, to whoever, he wrote, my dear William, so a very close friend, clearly. Lord forgive me, I'm quite shameless for publishing Dracula, which I think is, most Stoker letters are very formal. And we rarely see much of Stoker's personality. I think kind of, to know that he was potentially quite cheeky and quite funny, for me, adores Stoker and Dracula, is a lovely touch, I think, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show. The Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey, will join me ahead of the Strategic Defence Review, which is set to be announced tomorrow. Will it adequately address the national security threats we face? And what does he make of GB News footage showing all of those migrants once again crossing the channel? I'll also be speaking to Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, fresh from his adventures on London Underground. What's his reaction to Lord Hermer's comments and fresh revelations that he approved Lucy Connolly's prosecution? Also, how do the Tories plan to deal with Islamist terrorists in our prisons? Reform UK councillor Darren Grimes, now deputy leader of Durham County Council. He'll be here. What's his reaction to almost 1,200 small boats crossing the Channel yesterday, or indeed migrants on those small boats crossing the Channel with the help of the French police, it seems? Economist Dr Andrew Lillico will be here to cost up Reform UK's policy promises announced by Nigel Farage earlier this week. How do they measure up to Labour's current economic performance? And Janie Hamilton, whose son James died after battling cannabis addiction, will be here to share her family's heartbreaking story amid calls to decriminalise the drug this week. We've once again got another action-packed show lined up for you, so do not even think of going anywhere. Let's get stuck into the Sunday papers first of all, and joining me to analyse them is former BBC broadcaster Nicholas Owen. Nicholas, lovely to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Let's get into the migrant surge story. It's all over the Telegraph's front page.
It is, yes. It's time for pictures to paint 1,000 words and all that, isn't it? The thing that strikes me, Sunday Telegraph front page, there's this migrant boat coming across the Channel, rather anxious looking. But what I think so many people would say straight away is all young men on here. Now, actually, there are other pictures showing 1 or 2 children being lifted in as well, but mostly it's young men coming.
And what are we extrapolating from that?
Well,
Nicholas?
I mean, these people are obviously looking for a better life, yes, and all of that, but the numbers are just getting extraordinary. And the operation yesterday in the Channel was quite amazing. The Border Force couldn't cope. Almost all their boats were out. They had to commandeer fishing boats. And I read somewhere, I mean, this sounds extraordinary, there was a pleasure cruise boat. I don't know who still goes out in the saucy Sue.
Pleasure cruising on the Channel.
Yeah, I know.
Spotting migrants on your way rather than dolphins.
But this boat was in trouble. This boat was in trouble. It got a hole in it or something. So they were sort of, oh, we need help. I said, sorry, we can't help you, mate. I'm sorry. Fortunately, that boat managed to fix the hole and got back to harbour.
They couldn't help because they're too busy dealing with dinghies.
The whole thing is just incredibly crazy, isn't it? And the other picture, which is going to, I just think, madden people, whatever the arguments, is the French police. 4 burly-looking French coppers standing on the beach, just peering out. I think one of them's got his phone up. The Mail on Sunday, yes.
I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it, to think that we've paid them nearly £500 million.
Yes.
To stand and take photographs of migrants arriving or leaving and arriving on British shores. There they are. So they're there standing there.
Yeah, there's those policemen.
From the French police, because this is apparently what smashing the gangs is all about, just watching people cross in barely inflatable dinghies.
But Camilla, I must say that even the Sunday Telegraph, which is, of course, would take a bit of a hard line on all of this.
Quite right too.
Well, exactly, you would say that. I quite agree with what you're saying. But they also do quote at great length what the government has said about what's supposed to be happening. The French have had lots of money to do it, and they're considering all sorts of things here, and it all sounds as though everything's going to be absolutely hunky-dory. We've developed
going swimmingly,
strong cooperation, apart from the fact they keep on coming, 1,200 arrivals yesterday. 30% up on the same point last year. It's desperate.
I mean, the
times.
weather does have a role, obviously,
of
because it's nice and calm. It was sunny yesterday, and it's going to continue to be sunny over this weekend. And looking into July and August, if the conditions keep up, then thousands more will come. But I'm going to ask John Healey, the Defence Secretary, when he comes on a little later, in what world is this smashing the gangs? What gangs have been smashed?
Yeah, exactly.
And if they have been smashed, they don't seem to have been smashed very effectively.
Yeah. And they claim they have big new agreements coming with the French, and if you get a chance to press him on that, that's most important. Have they really got that? Really?
Well, also, what's happened
no evidence
to
of it, is there?
Taxpayers' money? 480 million it is that we've given to the French. I'm not sure what for.
Yeah, exactly. If you didn't give it, I think I heard you say this before, if we didn't give it to them, would it make any difference at all?
No,
not sure
probably not. I don't think it would. Onwards to the BMA strike.
Ah, yes.
This surprised me because I thought we had given junior doctors, now known as
resident doctors,
quite a big pay uplift, and yet still they're threatening
they're being offered,
I
think, something like 4 or 5%, aren't they, which is above the rate of inflation. They had a very big pay rise soon after the government came in to sort of try and stop all the disputes that were in the past. But they want to make up, they say, I think going back over about 5, 6, 7 more years, they want something like 29%.
But weren't they given a very large percentage rise?
They were, yeah.
So they want so on top of that, they've been offered the 4%. But they're saying that's still not enough.
Still not enough.
And then there's some rhetoric around, Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, said to the Tories back in the day when he was in opposition, you must negotiate.
Yeah, now he's not.
Well, now, funnily enough, he's not meeting with them.
Yes.
This is what happens when campaigning in opposition meets reality of governance.
Yes.
It's quite hard, isn't it, to part with hard-earned taxpayers' cash as readily as the unions might like.
Yes, indeed. Yes, it has a lot of relevance and reverberations in many, many areas.
But what about patients, Nicholas? Does it say anything about what will happen to waiting lists?
You've got to be careful about this, because apparently this is only the very start. This is a tip of an iceberg job, in that if these this particular group of doctors don't get their way, then the other groups standing in the wings want more money as well, and we could be back to there's a wonderful phrase about we could be back to a Christmas Day style of an NHS delivery.
Wow.
I think I've said this on this programme before, that just around the time of the last Christmas and New Year period, my wife was actually in hospital, and so I witnessed firsthand what that really means. And, things are going to get very, very tough.
A nightmare before Christmas.
I feel sorry for Streeting. I don't know what your view is. I think he's all the intentions are in the good place. But as you say, hard reality when you actually get into office.
Well, we don't mind Streeting, because unlike the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Deputy Prime Minister, he's actually willing to come on the show and answer some straight questions.
Oh, well, he's
I don't know what they're afraid of.
He's definitely a very good
very
man.
friendly here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about white working-class children falling behind, because there's a whole series of education stories in all of the papers, actually. And the data isn't looking good, is it, for particularly young white boys?
Yes, for some, this is the particular, here's the headline, it says it, doesn't it? All but 21 of the UK's 3,400 secondary schools, white working-class boys fall behind. In other words, their exam results are absolutely terrible, or indeed non-existent. I mean, they just don't get any passes at all. White working-class girls are not quite so bad, but it's nearly there. Well, the criticism is that there were actually one or two initiatives by the last government to try to tackle this sort of thing, be a bit tougher. They had sort of, I think, hubs where white working-class boys were encouraged to go to sort of boost up their education. And these things are among the many things that have had to be slimmed back, because if you're going to try and spend money the way that the Education Secretary wants to in other ways, you can't do everything. But it's a terrific problem, isn't it? One of the things many things I don't understand about it, but one of them is it doesn't seem to apply in other countries. We measure up terribly badly to every other country, and I don't know why that should be.
I wonder if we can get up the Observer page 12, because it was quite an interesting chart of how white children compare to other ethnicities. And this is the other problem as well, that if you look at members of the Indian community, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, their children are all performing better, it seems, in UK schools than ours are. And then you have to ask yourself the question, and this was something that Nigel Farage raised in the week, and I'll be speaking to Darren Grimes a bit later about reforms, sort of family-friendly tax policies, if you can put it that way. Is it because of breakdown of family? Are white working-class families more likely to have a degree of breakdown in the marriages?
All these things. And at the end of the day, the other thing I do wonder about and worry about, because, grandchildren and people coming up behind us all the time, is what are actually people going to be doing when they do actually finally leave school and education, college, maybe even university. Here's another thing, it's all talking about white working class children, but even people who are getting a good education going right through the system to university, not finding the opportunities there.
Right.
Terrifying.
So
the people at the bottom of the heap are bound to be worse off.
There's actually a really good study in there. There's a campaigner called Paul Wiltshire who has done a load of work on whether degrees actually do pay the salaries that they promise the students at the beginning of the course, at the end of the course. And there are a lot of degrees out there which perhaps don't need to be studied over 3 years. It's too expensive now. They could be completed in 2. Are you going to earn more money at the end of it? Would it be better to do a degree apprenticeship and all the rest of it? Just a quick aside.
What's this?
The Sunday Telegraph suggesting that children in school are now going to be taught that not all Vikings were white and some of them might have been Muslims?
Yes, that's right. Diversity. As they came sweeping in, what was it, raping and pillaging and everything else, but actually they were a jolly nice, diverse collection of people.
Were they? I thought they were all white, blonde-haired Scandinavians.
I thought so too.
What's happening? Are we wrong? Are we wrong, or is the revisionism wrong?
Well,
I think the question, Nicholas.
You know, almost everything about the Vikings seems to be wrong to me. I remember reading a story that, you know, they should have had helmets with horns on. Well, no, actually, apparently that never really happened.
No.
You know? So almost everything we know about the Vikings is wrong. But this is the latest thing that's wrong.
What next? Trigger warnings on asterisks and obelisks. Oops, just in case it offends anyone with any sensibilities. Let's finally, keeping up with the Camerons, is the headline that we've given it now. Sarah Vine, the ex-wife of Michael Gove, has written a book, Nicholas. What's she saying about Samantha and David Cameron once they're besties?
Indeed, they were really good friends. Of course, both of them rising to the very top of the Tory party, the other one almost, as I say, David Cameron became Prime Minister and everything else. But of course, they found themselves on opposite sides of the Brexit debate. Yes. So that's the old thing, isn't it? Cameron very much wanted the vote to go his way. Of course, it didn't. Michael Gove was joined the antis. He didn't seem to know whether he was going to or he didn't. And this sort of drove the two families apart. And lots of some shouting matches and everything else.
Yeah, but not just between the husbands, but also between the wives.
Well, between the wives,
Sam Cam apparently losing it and saying to Sarah Vine, get your husband under control.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And poor old Sarah Vine. I do feel a bit sorry for her, I must say. There was a quote, which I'm not sure I can find it quickly.
No, it's in the Sunday Times, right at the bottom of your pile. Why I wrote the book.
That's right. Yes. She writes this book, which is all about what it's like to be married to a senior figure like this, what it's like to go through the terrible divorce and everything else, and what it's like to have a terrible row with your old best mates. And she said at the end, I thought long and hard about writing this book, and in the end I decided that since politics has cost me my marriage, most of my friends, and almost all of my sanity, I no longer have anything much to lose.
Well, we love books where the author has nothing to lose. Nicholas Owen, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Stay tuned, because up next I'm going to be speaking to the Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello, there's plenty of hot sunshine across most of the Mediterranean, but there are some thunderstorms in places, particularly in southern France. Across the Canary Islands and Madeira, though, there'll be this brisk northerly flow on Monday, bringing in quite a bit of cloud, but sunshine for southern parts of Spain. Here are those thunderstorms across the Alps, southern parts of France, but most of Italy, the Balkans and Greece and Turkey having plenty of hot sunshine and temperatures into the high 20s, and the outlook is for plenty more dry and settled weather.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Nigel is back.
Good evening.
Unfiltered.
Are these proposals bold enough?
Uncompromising.
Will it bring growth?
Unmissable.
We as a country are brilliant.
Nigel Farage returns this Tuesday from 7 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. We're just waiting for the Defence Secretary, John Healey, to join us. Before then, let's speak to Nicholas Owen again, who has helped me to go through the morning papers. And there's quite a few stories on the front pages about this whole Strategic Defence Review tomorrow.
Yes.
And also what Healey is generally planning, because he's sort of suggesting that we're on a war footing.
Yeah, actually, yes. I think this is Healey himself being quoted, by the Sunday Times here. The world is definitely becoming more dangerous. Nuclear risks are rising. We face now, for the first time since the end of the Cold War, seriously increasing risks of state-on-state conflict. Well, it is apocalyptic stuff. But listen, I think the interesting point about this is, yes, a lot more money is going to be spent. Goodness knows where it comes from. British fighter jets may carry nuclear bombs and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's not been confirmed nor denied.
No.
It seems to be as part of a general conversation
Yeah.
about how we rearm ourselves against the rising threat.
Yes, you do. Anyway, but the other thing is, it always strikes me, is a bit like Trump and his tariff plans and getting jobs back to America. All this sounds very long-term, doesn't it? £6 billion on munitions, £1.5 billion on 6 new factories to build munitions. Surely that takes years to do, doesn't it?
But then when we talk about upping defence spending, so it's going to go up to 3% by 2034, Trump would rather it went to 3% by the end of this Parliament.
Yes,
but then that is, again, forcing the Treasury, Rachel Reeves, with her very minimal fiscal headroom, to find money from where exactly? I mean, the most staggering thing, I had this, in the Telegraph did it, I think Elizabeth has printed it out for me, it's this amazing pie chart of government spending, or at least how much of our pound is spent on different government departments. It's here, you can't see it, but just to be clear about the figures. Welfare benefits, 31.8%. NHS, 20.4%. So how staggering, first of all, that we're spending much more on welfare than we are on the whole of the NHS. When you look at defence and foreign affairs, 6.2%. I mean, it's actually quite minimal. Do you think we should be spending more?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if the threat, and it does seem to be real, doesn't it? I tell you what worries me, another thing about all of this, that the nature of warfare is changing all the time. And by the time you've built your factories and you've got the new munitions, or you've put some sort of tactical things into jet fighters, they've hopped ahead with doing something else. You know? It's a terribly difficult game to follow.
It's intriguing that we've got Labour spending more on defence than the Tories ever did.
Well, indeed, I think I'm old enough to remember so many Labour governments down the years. They always seem to get into this situation quite quickly.
But why? Because it's so weird. They've got far more pressure, particularly from the left flank, not to up defence spending. You've got MPs on the left of the government basically saying we should be spending more on foreign aid and welfare and all the rest of it. And yet Labour governments have had a history of spending more than their Tory counterparts.
They have absolutely done that. Well, of course, the threats we face are very, very, very real. And as I'm trying to say, those threats keep changing as well, and all sorts of different things. I mean, perhaps an awful lot of money needs to be spent on countering cyber warfare and all this sort of thing.
Yes.
I mean, that
so $1 billion's been set aside. I think that John Healey is making the point, and I'll ask him about this when he is available, which should be very, very soon, is that, the keyboard is posing a big threat to our own national security. This problem with, first of all, Chinese and Russian hacking, this problem with the vulnerability of our underseas cables. You know, we had that situation, didn't we, with the power outage in Spain? And oh my goodness, is it a hacking attempt? We've seen that with British businesses here, the havoc that can be wreaked by people just on the other end of a computer.
The Marks and Spencers and so on having a very tough time. No, it's a desperately difficult thing. Healy always says all the right, to me, he's saying the right things. It's got to be done. But you're absolutely, going back to your pie chart, absolutely right. Where is this money going to come from? That is the absolutely key question, I think.
Also,
absolutely
should we be running around after Donald Trump's demands? This is the other big question. You know, he's been flip-flopping somewhat, hasn't he, on Russia and Ukraine?
Yes.
He said this week that Putin has gone, quotes, absolutely crazy and is playing with fire. Some might argue, well, unfortunately, you weren't tough enough on him in the first place.
Yes. The man who was going to end the war on the first day, I seem to remember, the first day of his presidency.
Is he still in line for a Nobel Peace Prize? To be fair, I spoke to Jason Miller in the studio last week. That's one of his closest advisors. He advised him for all 3 presidential campaigns. His argument on Trump is, look, Trump does care deeply about deaths. He doesn't like war. He doesn't like to see civilian casualties. The same could be applied to Ukraine as is applied to the whole Gaza situation.
Yes.
I mean, this is the other interesting thing about Labour government. Is it at 6 and 7s with itself? You've got David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, making accusations against Netanyahu, talking about the Israeli blockades being morally corrupt, I think it is. That's completely against the grain of how Starmer's trying to act as an international statesman.
Yeah, it's a mess, isn't it? A very extremely difficult thing. But anyway, going back to this defence spending thing, I think when you get Mr. Healy, and I hope this will be very soon, there are lots of interesting things you've really got to sort of try and focus in on. And another important thing, we talked about white working class young men falling behind earlier on, didn't we? Working class boys falling behind in schools. Once upon a time, a career in the army, in the military of some sort, was a lot of young men would go for that. But that's been falling off as well. How do you encourage a new generation of young men who not getting opportunities elsewhere, to think of the military actually as a viable option? That's a very important thing, I think.
Well, the numbers have come down, and you do wonder where they're going to recruit if they want to add those extra sort of feet on the ground. The other thing is remember with how much derision Rishi Sunak's admittedly last-ditched attempt to save his general election campaign with the national service idea was treated. I mean, people were literally ridiculing him and saying it was a humiliation and embarrassment. Why? I mean, is there anything wrong with a period of national service? Or what do you think, Nicholas? Am I being a bit old-fashioned?
I think you're being. I think you're being a tiny bit old-fashioned. Because I think the nature of everything is warfare and military life and everything else has changed. In the days when it was just before my time. I'm not old enough to have done that military service, but I have some pals still around who did military service. Now look here, just be careful. I remember the day war broke out and all of that. But no, in those days, people would go and you literally needed loads and loads of young men to go stamping around parade grounds, and all that sort of thing, and learning discipline and all of that. That actually is not a bad aspect to it. But modern warfare is about much more than that. It's about all these other intricate things. And the people, you do need more boots on the ground as well. But how do you encourage people to think that that's a proper career?
Better. I mean, this is the other problem, isn't it? We hear so many stories, we've covered them on GB News, about, first of all, we've got Northern Ireland veterans now facing historic prosecutions for what went on during the Troubles. We often hear from people who represent charities helping veterans, saying that they're often left on Civvy Street with no support. A lot of them turn to alcoholism and they've got PTSD. This is the other thing. I mean, we should probably revere members of the armed forces as much as they do in America, where literally if there's a soldier in uniform in a sports stadium, everyone stands up and applauds them.
I love the phrase the Americans use, they discover that somebody has been in the military and has perhaps served in some campaigns and so on, and say, thank you for your service. And you hear that on the street, people just say it, and it's a lovely expression.
But soldiers in this country, particularly following the death of Lee Rigby, are not always open to wearing their fatigues in public, fear a degree of sort of public condemnation at times. you know, what has it come to that we can't celebrate our soldiers?
Yes, I agree with you.
But if
It is sad.
if you've got our own government, you know, there's an act of lawfare going on against them. The Tories have put together a petition. I think Mark Francois, David Davis and others have said, well, what lesson does it send if you're literally saying that if you fought for, at the time, Queen and country during the Troubles and followed orders and did what you thought was right, those men didn't know that 30, 40 years later, now they're pensioners, that the long arm of the law would come after them.
Well, the worst example of that was a group of SAS men, wasn't it, who knew that there'd been an attack on a police station, I think it was. The chaps drove up on a lorry and fired mortars or something at the police station, drove round the corner to find an SAS ambush waiting for them, and the SAS opened fire, and IRA men, a lot of IRA men were killed. Well, that seems to me to be the nature of when you are fighting what was literally a war in Northern Ireland. It's the sort of thing you had to be prepared to do. Now, it looks as though we're turning around and saying, oh, no, that could possibly have been a criminal act.
Well, also, when you think about the pardons that have been issued to people associated with that terrorism. I mean, it's kind of completely one-sided. Haven't there been surveys of young people as well saying, you know, no, I don't want to fight for king and country?
Yes. And
which is depressing. I mean, and I don't think we should speak for an entire generation Z or Alpha, by the way, because I think there are a lot of people that would want to commit themselves to trying to sort of support their fellow man and woman. But I think the general vibe is that, you know, people would... If we had a situation with conscription, God forbid, would there be quite a few draft dodgers?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, it goes back to the old thing that people always worry about, that the Germans and Hitler and so on in the 30s were very much emboldened by the vote at the Oxford Union, wasn't it? Where we will not, the motion was this House would not fight for king and country, and there was a large majority said they would not. Of course, have come 1939, things were very different. When the threat is absolutely very real, and you know, the foreign troops marching up your high street, people's attitudes change.
But then we spoke about it in the paper review, revisionist history. Yes. The Vikings weren't actually white Scandinavians. No, but it's the same when you talk about how Churchill is reimagined for this generation, and it's often heavily loaded with sort of apologetic, oh no, we can't, you know, see him in the context of his time. We need to refer back to him apparently being a racist, got to be embarrassed of colonialisation, of which he was a proponent, arguably, rather than seeing the fact that the man was, at the time, the greatest living Briton for literally rescuing this country along with other allied nations from Nazi tyranny.
Yes.
Like, how difficult is this for kids to understand?
Absolutely.
This is the other thing about how history is taught in schools, I think. And I say that as a mother of a daughter doing her history GCSE as we speak.
Well, don't forget.
Go on to A-level. We are waiting for... We're filling time because we're waiting for the Defence Secretary, John Healey, to join us. We're hoping he joins us very, very soon so I can put some of these questions to him. Not only do we want to ask about the spending review and how much money Labour is going to claw back from the Treasury to put into defending this great nation, but also I want to get his view on what's been happening in the Channel overnight. You'll have seen Mark White, our Home Affairs editor, and indeed some of that footage showing so many people arriving here by dinghy because the weather is nice. We're now into the summer season. That whole notion of the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, saying she would smash the gangs. Have any gangs been smashed? I can't seem to see it. Also be interested, actually, if we've got enough time with him, I'm going to speak to him shortly, to discuss Chagos.
Oh,
the great giveaway to the Mauritians.
Yeah, what happened? I'm a bit behindhand on that. That all suddenly happened, didn't it?
Well,
it was in doubt, and then suddenly they signed up and they're gone.
There's a few tentacles. I need to ask him as well about Lord Hermer, the Attorney-General, because there's a tentacle leading back to him. There's a tentacle, funny enough, leading back to the Chinese Communist Party, because one of the judges on the court that ruled that actually, yes, we must give this island back to Mauritius, even though Mauritius never had it in the first place, is linked to Xi Jinping. And it's going to be in China's interest for us to be sharing intelligence with Mauritius when it comes to Diego Garcia. Like, hugely problematic from a defence and security perspective, all this.
Yes.
Going around in circles. Oh, and by the way, we're paying apparently $30 billion for the privilege of giving away an island. Why aren't we being paid?
No, that is, it's a conundrum. I can't answer that one, I'm afraid. That is an absolutely extraordinary story, isn't it? Amongst so many that are going round and round.
But it's very odd because we had a situation here last week where the Labour MP, Alex Ballinger, denying that it was going to cost $30 billion. saying that it was going to cost 3.4 billion because that was what civil servants had calculated, when we pointed out, but no, over the course of the entire deal, it's worked out at £30 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't John Healey want that for his defence budget?
Insane. Very strange, very strange. There's so many strange things going on. So many strange things going on.
And on that cyber threat, by the way, this is what the MOD is also announcing. It's going to give £1 billion over the course of the next Parliament because we are dealing with, apparently, 90,000 cyber attacks on the MOD in the last 2 years.
Good grief, good grief.
So he said the keyboard has become a weapon of war. With the new cyber and electromagnetic command, that's going to take this £1 billion of investment, critics are going to question whether that's enough scale, frequency or indeed capability for the evolving nature of modern cyber warfare.
Yes.
I mean, do you think the next wars will be waged on the internet rather than on the ground?
Well, I think there will be a lot of that, and yes, I do think that. I don't think it's a matter of sort of, you know, Russian soldiers sweeping across Europe, because what the Russians have discovered, they thought they could knock over Ukraine in a few days. That was the original plan, and of course that went very, very wrong for them. They've lost vast numbers of troops, so they have turned to other means of warfare. And the other thing is, we now see drone warfare. On an unimaginable scale. I'm not sure. I was trying to read very carefully this stuff this morning. I don't think I saw much about it. There is a drone, I think you mentioned some sort of drone force.
I think John Healey's with us.
Good.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Defence Secretary John Healey, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Before we get into the Defence Spending Review, which is tomorrow, hello, nice to see you. Can we just talk about these crossings across the Channel? A record 1,200 people confirmed to have arrived at Dover yesterday. In what world, Mr Healey, is this the Labour government smashing the gangs?
It's Labour government taking some of the steps necessary to deal with what's a complex international problem, and the fact that, in truth, Britain lost control of its borders 5 or 6 years ago. And so when the Tories left office and left government last year, they left the asylum system in chaos, they left record levels of immigration, and the sight we've seen of these small boats over this last 24 hours just underlines and highlights the problem. And what we're doing with the French is a part of trying to deal with these gangs. Well, part of what's necessary is to get the French to intervene when the boats are in shallow waters, not just when they're on the shore. And we've got to a stage now which the previous government just didn't get to, where we've got the cooperation of the French and a new relationship in place. We've got the agreement of the French that they will start to intervene in these shallow waters, not just on the shore. And our work now with the French is to get this into operation, because what we have seen is these smugglers setting to sea down the coast and arriving in these shallow waters to pick people up like a taxi. We've got to end that, and that's part of smashing the gangs, reducing the small boats, as well as getting on top of the asylum system.
Sorry, just on the French, I mean, we've paid the French 480 million. Actually, interceptions are down under this Labour government. In 2023, the French were intercepting 47% of crossings. Last year, they were intercepting 45% of crossings. This year, they're only intercepting 38%. So what on earth have we given them £500,000 quid for? £500 million quid, in fact.
Well, it's not just about payment. It's not just about payment. This highlights the fact that it's a question about powers, and it's about the French police having the new powers to be able to deal with these migrants and these boats when they're on the water, in those shallow waters, not just on the shore. And if we get that operation in place, it will start to help. And you talk about the cost, 700 million under the last government of the Rwanda scheme, and just four volunteers and 700 million of taxpayers' money.
Well, you don't know if it would have been a deterrent because you scrapped it before you'd even tried it. If Rwanda was in place now, you might not have 1,200 people arriving by dinghy yesterday.
It was a failed scheme. It was hugely expensive. It wasn't working. We scrapped it, and we've been able to use that money to clamp down on those people who should not be in this country. And so that's why you've seen since the election 30,000 people deported for this country because they have no right to be in this country. And that's at a level we haven't seen for years.
Can you comment on this story, Mr. Healy, on the front of the Sunday Telegraph headlined, the Sunday Times, British fighter jets to carry nuclear bombs?
Well, when we produce the Strategic Defence Review and publish that tomorrow, you'll see it set out the way that we are in a period of new threats. And my job as Defence Secretary, and our job as a government, our first duty as a government, is to make sure that we keep this country safe. Now, I'm not going to comment on the detail of that story, and those sorts of discussions must remain secret between allies, not in public. But I will say this about the nuclear deterrent that the UK has. It has been the ultimate guarantee of our safety for more than 70 years. It is what Putin fears most, and the UK is the only country that fully commits its nuclear deterrent to the protection of other NATO allies. And strong deterrence is essential to keep our people safe, our country safe, and the alliance safe as well.
OK, so you're not denying that story. That story, the contents of it are roughly true, but no final decisions have been made.
You'll read more tomorrow in the Strategic Defence Review about the risks that we face, about the new nuclear risks that are rising. But I'm not going to comment on that story today. And these are discussions which are not conducted in public and should never be conducted in public.
OK. Can you give us some more clarification of why you have said the keyboard has become a weapon of war?
I've been quite shocked by this, to be quite honest. I took over as Defence Secretary 10 months ago, and in the last year, defence across the range has been the subject of 90,000 attacks, cyber attacks, that are linked to other states. Now, with that level of aggression, that level of threat, it's quite clear that the keyboard has become a weapon of war, and it's one of the reasons that in the last couple of days I've made the commitment that we'll put £1 billion into the digital upgrade of our armed forces so that we can link AI, autonomy and drones to the hard metal of tanks and artillery and planes. But also we'll establish a new cyber command to try and deal with these threats. And alongside that, of course, I want to make sure, and the SDR will set this out, how the record increase in defence investment that we're putting in from a diversion of overseas development aid money brings a defence dividend with more jobs, more support for British business right across the UK.
OK, when we think of cyber threats, I think we instantly think of Russia and China. And the audience will think there's a contradiction in government policy here. On one hand, to plough this £1 billion into trying to fight cyber threats, and on the other, spending £30 billion worth of taxpayers' money over the course of the next decades, giving away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, who in turn are linked to China and Russia.
Diego Garcia is a very special base that we share with the Americans. It is fundamental to our and their intelligence and defence. It has an airfield and a deep water port that allows our nuclear-powered submarines and our carrier to dock. It allows us to deploy armed forces around the world. And we had to secure, it was jeopardised, the future of that base was jeopardised in the few years ahead. And this was the only way, and it is the most effective way, of securing the operational sovereignty for Britain of that base for the next 99 years and beyond. It's a good deal for our armed forces. It keeps Britain safer, and that's why it has the support from the US, it has the support from India, it has the support from the UN as well.
But what about that clause in the contract which says that we have to automatically intelligence share with Mauritius? Aren't you concerned about their close relationship with China and Russia and what information Mauritius might actually share, which might not be in our national interest?
There's no clause like that in the treaty. In fact, what there is in the treaty is not just the total operational control of Diego Garcia for the UK, but a 20-mile exclusion zone that allows us to stop Chinese or any other hostile activity, and a lock on the development and any activity on the wider islands up to around 100 nautical miles. This is a way that we protect what is an essential intelligence and defence base for us and for our closest ally, the United States.
But there is a clause in the deal which puts a duty on the British to tell the Mauritian government of any attack on another state conducted from Diego Garcia. That's been said by some in the intelligence community to be a massive gift to Beijing.
They're entirely wrong about that. Look, we have total operational freedom and sovereignty. We will do for 99 years and beyond. In the treaty, it requires us expeditiously as possible to let the Mauritians know if we've used the base for military activity. We can do that. We can do that, and we will, but it protects our ability to operate from Diego Garcia. It protects the ability of the US as our closest allies to continue to keep this absolutely essential base where we conduct operations that we could not conduct and the US could not conduct anywhere else in the world. That's why it's so important, both to the safety of UK citizens. It's been the place in which we've disrupted and broken up terrorist cells, attacking Britain as well as attacking our troops deployed around the world. It's the way that we are able to deploy our forces safely across the world as well, and it's an essential element of that special closeness between the US and the UK on intelligence and defence.
Very final quick question, Defence Secretary, maybe just a yes or no answer will expedite time. Was it acceptable for the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, to describe Reform UK and Tories advocating leaving the ECHR as akin to Nazis?
No, he's apologised for it. It's a mistake.
Should he resign?
He's recognised exactly what you say.
OK. All right. Defence Secretary John Healey, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you. Well, lots still to come today. I'm going to be speaking to the Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, be talking to him about the Conservatives' pledge to arm prison officers to crack down on Islamist terrorists in jails. I'll also be speaking to the Reform UK councillor Darren Grimes. What's his reaction to almost 1,200 small boats crossing the channel, or migrants in small boats crossing the channel yesterday? Plus, I'm going to be joined by Janie Hamilton, who is going to share her family's very heartbreaking story of her son's death from cannabis abuse, and that's in light of Sadiq Khan supporting a report this week calling for it to be decriminalised. But first, joining me now is the economist and executive director and principal of Europe Economics, Dr. Andrew Lillico. Lovely to see you this morning, Andrew. So we've had to slightly shift the show around because we were late to speaking to the Defence Secretary John Healey. Let's just have a look at reforms announcements this week. Do Nigel Farage's figures actually add up? Because they're pledging £80 billion in tax cuts. How's it actually going to work?
Well, I don't think it really matters whether numbers add up at this point. We're talking about things which an incoming Reform government might do in 2029. That's going to be a very different world. That's going to be a world in which humans have walked on Mars, in which AI dominates every workplace, in which if China's going to attack Taiwan, it will have done so, and in which the UK may between now and then have faced a fiscal crisis. So I don't think that imagine if people had made policies in 2006 and sought to have them in great detail for what would have happened in the after the 2010 general election. It would have been a nonsense. So I think that's a flawed criticism of what they've been doing here. They're clearly trying to paint a picture of the kinds of things which they're likely to prioritise when they come into government. Because the world will be very different. It's unclear exactly how many of them will be relevant for them to do at the time. But that's the way of thinking about these things. I don't think any opposition party under these circumstances should be seeking to provide a detailed programme where every line item adds up as if they were going to be implementing them all tomorrow.
But Dr. Lillico, are you saying that because of the nature of the changing world and indeed our ageing population, that the electorate must just get used to high tax and spend policies because anything alternative just simply isn't economically viable?
Absolutely not. I would say almost the opposite. I think that we've been living in a fantasy world for the past 15 or 17 years, ever since the global financial crisis of 2008, and that we've steadfastly refused to accept the idea that we're poorer than we were in the past, and we have to therefore adjust the amount of spending which we do on things like health and on pensions. But that kind of thing, I think, is going to eventually be imposed upon us. There's no political appetite at the moment for addressing that reality. In the end, though, we may find that markets impose that upon us by refusing to lend the government any more money. And that might well happen quite soon, even before the next general election.
But hang on a minute. I mean, successive governments are responsible for government spending going up. Let's just look at the benefits bill. And that's why what Farage said in the week was intriguing. His suggestion that he'd not only overturn the cut to winter fuel, but also end that two-child benefit cap. That's an extraordinary thing for somebody purporting to be on the right to say when we know the benefits bill has shot up by a staggering £86 billion in the last decade.
It's absolutely the case. The reform has adopted this kind of economic populism, which is quite common around the world. Trump has done some similar things. It's popular across much of Europe, where the way in which we used to think about what the right thought on economic questions is that's like 10 years ago way of thinking about what the right does. The right these days favors a different set of agendas. It prioritizes cultural issues, things to do with immigration. On the side of the economy, I think that they may well be end up wanting, at least in principle, to spend in many areas, just as much as the left would. The things which they say they're going to do, of course, is to save some money on doing less on the way of dealing with the environment, doing less in the way of dealing with diversity, equality and inclusion issues. I think it remains to be seen whether they'll get anything like the amount of reductions which they talk about at this stage in doing that. And I think that's quite implausible, their numbers on that count. But they will have to find something. I think in the end what will happen is that markets will force us to spend less on health and education unless we find a way to make our economies grow faster. And it could be that the latter happens because, as I say, the world is going to be very, very different in 4 or 5 years' time. It could be that AI and space tech and green tech and cancer vaccines and who knows what make the economies grow faster. That's a bit of a Hail Mary pass for governments at this point because they're in really bad trouble fiscally. Many governments around the world are, but the UK, I think, is in a particularly bad position. And politics doesn't really have an answer to all of this. What we're doing at the moment is relying on a hope that technology addresses for us the problems that our politics is unwilling to deal with. And I think that's weak, but that's unfortunately the reality we've faced for some time.
You've been speaking in quite long-term way about the kind of future of our economy and indeed our politics. Just to think more short-termism for the moment and looking ahead to the autumn budget, we've got a situation where the Chancellor Rachel Reeves has got a very minimal amount of fiscal headroom compared to some of her predecessors. We've got a situation where the jobs market seems to be drying up. Yes, we had that unexpected growth in Q1, but that hasn't accounted for so-called awful April. We've got inflation having shot up to 3.6%, I think it was, in the last couple of weeks. What's your prediction for how the economy will perform over the course of the next 6 months?
I think it's most likely that we'll see some reduction probably see a contraction in GDP in at least one of the next 2 quarters. Quite a bit of that boost that we saw in the first quarter was probably driven by importers and exporters trying to get in ahead of the Trump tariffs. So There was an element of that. And I think that that's just going to mean less output later in the year. It doesn't actually increase the output, it just shifts it around during the year. It's also been the case, I think, for the past few years that the first quarter of the year, ever since COVID has tended to be stronger than the years after. So I think that there's some statistical things which would bore your listeners about seasonal adjustments not being quite right at the moment. So I think the reality is that there'll be a reduction probably in one of the next 2 quarters. Rachel Reeves' position is very, very difficult. She has very little credibility now. A number of her key flagship policies are already being U-turned on by Starmer. She seems to be very unpopular internally in the Labour Party, teetering on the brink of being dismissed all of the time with the discussions about that. She has absolutely no scope to raise taxes any further, though she may well try. She may raise rates, but that doesn't mean that the amounts of the total tax take in terms of pounds is going to go up. The economy is already in a situation where we're chasing away the wealthier people who pay much of the tax. We see that in the statistics. The economy is likely to grow slower if she tries to put taxes up even further. And I think we're well into the doom loop phase here for economies.
All right, I wish we could end on a more positive note, Dr. Lillico, but there we have it. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Well, coming up next, thank you. Coming up next, I'm going to be joined by Janie Hamilton, and she's going to share her family's absolutely heartbreaking story of how they lost their son to cannabis. And she's speaking in the week that Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, supported a report suggesting that the drug be decriminalised. We'll also be speaking to Robert Jenrick and Darren Grimes in the next hour. Don't go anywhere.
At GB News, we are proud to stand for you, for the Britain you love, for the communities you live in. That's what makes us the fearless champions of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we, at GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here.
I'm Michelle Dewberry. Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
please bring us up to date.
Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. With me now is Janie Hamilton. Janie, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you very much for joining the show. I'm just going to summarise your son James's story. He began using cannabis at 14. Over time, that descended into a devastating cycle of mental illness. He was a very bright boy at the boarding school that you worked at, predicted straight A stars, but he got into the wrong crowd, started using cannabis, and over 16 years was repeatedly sectioned. He was diagnosed with testicular cancer, which you think was linked to the cannabis use, rejected treatment, and very, very sadly, he died at the age of 36, which is just a horrific story. So before we even get into this, my condolences. And you've been campaigning on this issue, and it's back in the news this week. And how do you feel, Janie, when you see the likes of the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, and there's plenty of other politicians that flirt with the idea of decriminalising or indeed legalising the very drug that you hold responsible for your own son's death?
Well, I feel dismayed. My heart sinks because I look at all those young people and I just know what will be ahead of some of them, not all of them, because it affects people differently.
When you think back to James first starting to use the drug, I mean, it's problematic, isn't it, when young people start using cannabis heavily? But is there something to be said for the age? To be 14, your brain isn't fully developed. How did you know that his behaviour as a teenager wasn't just teenage behaviour? There was something more sinister going on?
We didn't know. We didn't know at all. That I know now. I would recognise now if somebody was on smoking cannabis, but I didn't realise that the effects of cannabis mimic normal adolescent behaviour. So we were unaware. I was unaware until the day he was sectioned. I had no idea he was actually mentally ill. We just didn't know what was going on. Bizarre happenings in our household.
And do you blame the drug directly for bringing on a degree of psychosis and indeed schizophrenia in your son? There'd be no other explanation for that?
Absolutely not. In fact, after he died, shortly after he died, one of the consultants came up to me and she said, Janie, we've had to put on his death certificate, you know, the name for testicular cancer, whatever that is, and schizophrenia, because if he had been in his right mind, he would have accepted life-saving treatment. He didn't have to die at all. It was caught in time. He knew when he first saw a lump that he wouldn't let anyone examine him. Sorry.
No, so he'd almost... I mean, there's a degree of losing his own cognitive function during the process of his addiction to this drug. Yet at the same time, we've into an era, aren't we, where you walk around many towns and cities in England and you can smell cannabis. You'll have experienced this, I will have. We've had other examples. It's gone beyond Amsterdam now, this argument for decriminalisation and legalisation, states of America, Canada and beyond. It's almost as if this drug has become, in a way, more socially acceptable to young people. But what's the danger of that, Janie, as far as you're concerned?
Well, I speak to many pupils in schools, and I know that they're all smoking. It's in every school, you know, good schools, not so good schools, it's everywhere. And I've always said to them, don't look at your friend whom you know is smoking the stuff, because I said cannabis is a slow burner. And it was 6 years before we realised, well, before the effects became, you know, terrible in James. We just thought, what is going on with him? We never, ever thought he was mentally ill. We just didn't know what was going on.
And Janie, if some parents out there think that their own teenagers are smoking cannabis, now you know what you know, what would your advice to them be?
Well, they need to explain the facts about cannabis, if they know them themselves, to their child. But unfortunately, you know, once the psychosis sets in, they won't listen. It doesn't matter what you say. I mean, James was in such a bad way in the few months before his death that we took him on a walk along a lane he'd gone on a little pony on when he'd been a child. And we were trying to persuade him to have life-saving treatment. it was as if we were talking to a brick wall, and we just turned back, and my husband said, well, we'd have to start arranging your funeral then. We were trying to shock him. His consultant was saying, you will die a terrible death. Nothing made any difference because of the psychosis. He thought he was untouchable, and that was the cannabis. You can't get through to them.
I'm sure as well you advocate better campaigning and awareness in schools, Janie, finally.
Yes, people say that it doesn't make any difference for some people, but it does. I have spoken to hundreds and hundreds of pupils, and I can tell you that they do not move a muscle. They are absolutely shocked. And I've had so many of them come up to me afterwards and just thanking me so much. All of them have got an experience with a brother, a sister, a friend, as does everybody I speak to about cannabis. Everybody brings out a relative, a son, a friend whose lives are going nowhere. They're in their bedrooms. And as I have said before, these are the people who don't come into the statistics because they're not bad enough to be sectioned, but their lives are more or less over because they're going nowhere.
Yeah. Janie Hamilton, we need to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Just going to put up a picture of your son, James, who passed away at the age of 36. That's him as a younger man with a family dog. People talk about it very casually, as if it's nothing, but actually you speak to parents who have lost their children. Very, very serious. I think sometimes claims for decriminalisation and legalisation don't take into account the facts of what happens if you really get hooked on this drug and, as Janie has just explained, have severe mental problems as a result. Coming up next, we're going to be speaking to Robert Jenrick, who is the Shadow Justice Secretary. Don't go anywhere. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, it's a showery start to meteorological summer, windy in the northwest, but still pleasantly warm in the south and east. So a fresher start across the southern parts of England, but a bright start across Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp start here with heavy spells of rain that could be thundery. That swiftly moves its way eastwards, affecting much of northern England with showery outbreaks, then running into parts of Wales. That tends to break up. Then it'll be a case of sunny spells, scattered showers, but some strong winds, especially across the northwest of Scotland. Feeling warm in that sunshine, but not as mild and humid as recent days. So as we go through Sunday evening, like I said, some strong gusty winds coming down from the northwest across northwestern parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, showery outbreaks of rain. Turning a little bit dry across Northern Ireland later with some late evening sunny spells. Drier picture for northern England as we end Sunday. Elsewhere, a mixture of scattering of showers and some late evening sunshine. So as we go through the rest of Sunday evening, we actually have a ridge of higher pressure building in. So most of the showers will start easing as we go through the evening and overnight. A few showers may develop though still across western parts of Scotland, but otherwise plenty of clear spells. Temperatures ranging from 8 to 11 degrees, but could feel a little bit chilly in the countryside, especially in the north. So for many, Monday starts fine, dry and bright. Plenty of sunshine on offer, and it stays that way through much of the day. Some showers will bubble up, but the sunshine will be turning increasingly hazy across Northern Ireland and Scotland, with the winds increasing here too, ahead of the next area of low pressure. So cool in the north, but in the sunshine, highs of up to 22 degrees. Bye-bye for now.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. Joining me now is the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, fresh from his antics on the London Underground. Your critics, Mr. Jenrick, suggest that you're just politically performing and posturing and that you didn't carry out a risk assessment before you started confronting fare dodgers in the week. What's your response to that?
Well, good morning, Camilla. Good to be back on your show. Look, I think sometimes you just got to get stuck in. You can make speeches in Parliament, you can write articles, and look, I do all of those things, but you've got to get out there and shame sometimes the authorities into action. And I was fed up, and clearly by the reaction to this video, millions of people were fed up seeing a small minority breach the rules, not paying for their fare. It makes people feel like mugs that they are. And so hopefully this will push the do-nothing Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, into taking action, getting his enforcement officers out on the London Underground and actually stopping some of these people so that we can bring down fares for everyone else.
Have you heard anything from the Mayor of London in response to this? Or anyone in power at City Hall with any control over fare dodging? No.
No, well, the only thing I have heard is that they criticise me for not getting permission to go and film. So that, I think, says it all about the organisation. Look, there's obviously good people who work for TfL, but they are really led by donkeys in Sadiq Khan. We've got to get this situation fixed. And it's bigger than just this one issue, isn't it? It's graffiti on public transport. It's an obnoxious music being played by people who should be wearing headphones. It's having your mobile phone nicked. It's shoplifting. It's tradesmen having their vans broken into and their tools stolen. There's a general sense in the country right now that the public realm is being degraded, that people are not taking seriously so-called minor crimes, but ones which actually have a profound impact on people's lives. And if it takes me, as the Shadow Justice Secretary, to get out and about, I'm going to do that because I want the police and the authorities to be stepping up and taking action against each and every one of these problems.
But the public needs to be careful, don't they? I mean, I take your point particularly on loud music being played, but you don't really want to confront anybody, not least if they're young, because you wonder, in fact, when you were doing your fare dodging exercise, somebody threatened you and said that they had a knife on them. So the public have got to be careful, haven't they?
Yeah, look, I'm not asking members of the public to do what I did. It's my job to raise these issues. And some of these people are nasty people. As you say, somebody said they might have a knife amongst them when I spoke to them. What I want are the authorities to be taking action. So in the case of fare dodging, it's the enforcement officers. And when I was at Stratford Station, I saw 8 people not doing a great deal. There was even one bloke with his feet up on the counter, looking at his mobile phone when the gate was open. People were coming in and out. Probably some of them weren't paying. And, you know, on other issues, what is going on to tackle the epidemic of shoplifting right now in our country? All the phones that are being nicked out of people's hands when they're walking down the streets, and even more serious crimes than that. Look what Labour is doing on these issues. They're making it worse. They've just announced that you are barely ever going to go to prison for sentences of 12 months or less. That means thieves, burglars, thugs who beat people up are not going to go to jail. And just to finish this point, Camilla, the NCA, the National Crime Agency, the MI5, the police have said this is going to lead to a crime wave.
OK, well, let's put the counter-narrative, and it would be this. Theresa May's Home Secretary cut police numbers, and they've never recovered. And as far as the prison system's concerned, and I know you've got some ideas as how to better protect prison officers, you speak to anyone involved in the prison estate, and they'll say that another Tory, Chris Grayling, ruined our prisons. A load of experienced prison officers were forced into retirement. Now a load of inexperienced youngsters have been recruited. And unfortunately, the lags are now in control. And this happened under Tories' rule.
Well, Camilla, you know that I am the first person to acknowledge the mistakes of the last Conservative government. I resigned from the Cabinet because I thought it was completely wrong that Rishi Sunak wouldn't take my advice on stopping the boats and wouldn't go further to bring down legal migration. But I am now the Shadow Justice Secretary. I'm interested in the present and the future and in what we can do to make this country a better place. And on prisons, I'm really worried that there is a mounting issue about prison officer safety and, in particular, Islamist gangs and terrorists in our prisons. I'm warning today that unless the government takes action, it is only a matter of time before a prison officer is held hostage and, God forbid, is actually killed. That's why I've commissioned Ian Aitchison, one of the most respected former prison governors in our country, to bring forward recommendations that I'm giving to the government today. They have to act now. And I'm saying, let's have the backs of those brave prison officers. Let's properly equip them so that specialist officers in our maximum security jails have lethal weapons. So if, God forbid, a prisoner has a gun, they can take action and regain control of that jail as quickly as possible. And every day, let's make sure those officers have high-collar stab vests. It's totally wrong that they don't have that. These are brave men and women doing a tough job, and I want them to be properly protected.
But if you're talking about prison officers carrying guns, what if the inmates do take control of the prison? What if the inmates do overpower prison officers and then the inmates are armed?
Well, we're talking here about specialist trained officers in maximum security jails, using these in the most difficult situations, going to a secure armoury, getting them so they can respond rapidly and regain control of the prison. Today, prison officers do go in with guns in these situations, but they have to call for backup to come to the prison, and that can take hours. Some of these maximum security jails, like Long Lartin in Worcestershire, are in very rural locations. I'm not prepared for our prison officers to be left in that situation. And Charlie Taylor, the Chief Inspector of Prisons, he warned at the beginning of the year this exact situation could happen. He said that drones could be used so that guns get into prisons and get into the hands of these dangerous prisoners and these Islamist terrorists that are now in our jails. And something very similar to that happened this week. It is alleged that a terrorist got hold of a knife brought in by a drone into Long Lartin prison and used that to stab a prison officer. So this is already happening. We saw Axel Rudakabana, the Southport killer. He allegedly attacked a prison officer. We saw Hashim Abedi, one of the terrorists who plotted the Manchester Arena bombing. He allegedly attacked a prison officer. This is getting worse and worse and worse. Enough is enough. Let's have the backs of these brave officers.
All right. But it probably could have been predicted that Islamist extremism was going to become an increasing problem in Britain's prisons, and yet under the Conservatives you only created 28 isolation places for radical prisoners. That, in retrospect, was a grave mistake.
Well, we did create the separation centres, as you say,
but not
and
enough.
in fact, Ian Aitchison, who's written the report for me today, was the author of that policy. But we should have done more. You're absolutely right. We should have done more. Look, what we could do now is focus on the future, and the problem is getting significantly worse as there are more terror suspects, or more terrorists, not suspects, more convicted terrorists in our prisons today. At the moment, there are only 3 of these separation centres. One is closed. So there are precious few of these settings. What I want to do is restore solitary confinement. Let it mean solitary confinement, Camilla, not some kind of holiday camp where you have access to a kettle that you could boil water and use to attack a prisoner. I don't want there to be any privileges. We read in the papers this weekend that Axel Rudakabana is able to buy Maltesers and Haribo. This is pathetic. What would the victims of his crimes think about that? And certainly what would the prison officers think? I want these people to be in solitary confinement. I want the radicalising imams to be out of our prisons. Let's make sure all these people are properly security checked before they're let anywhere near these dangerous individuals.
All right, there's a couple of questions now because we're running out of time. Just on the Tories and reform, you had a meeting with Rupert Lowe. Are you accepting him into the Conservative Party, yes or no?
Look, I do know Rupert. We agree on many issues, including much to do with immigration, but that is not for me. He has to decide what his future is, and it's for Kemi as our leader to decide who is or isn't a member of the
But you'd happily have him in the fold?
It's not for me to decide that, Camilla.
Well, you must have an opinion as to whether you think he'd be a good Tory MP or not.
No, you're tempting me, but it isn't for me. It's for Kemi.
All right.
As our
okay.
leader
How
to make
about
that
this
decision.
one for
But
you?
if I could say on reform, can I say on reform?
Very quickly. We're running out of time.
Look what's happened this week. Look what's happened this week. You've had, astonishingly, Nigel Farage getting into bed with Keir Starmer
and
on
yet
hiking the welfare bill, spending £3.5 billion.
Still, you won't win your seat in Newark because of the rise of reform in your own patch. That's why you have been much more right-wing than there used to be because you know you have to be Faragian to have any hope in hell of being re-elected.
Look, no, that's not true, Camilla. But look at the last week. You've had Farage getting into bed on welfare bed. I know Nigel Farage likes a pint or two, but it feels to me as if he had one too many before he announced that he was going to spend £3.5 billion extra on welfare. And then you've got Zia Youssef, the chairman of Reform, doing this wacky cryptocurrency policy in Las Vegas. I mean, look, I'm all for innovation. But this is not the #1 priority of my constituents in Newark. I don't think Reform have the answers to the challenges this country faces. That is what I'm focused on.
All right, but the trouble is that they seem to refer Farage to Kemi Badenoch, and according to a Survation poll this morning, 2/3 of Conservative voters would prefer Boris Johnson to be leading the party, so not Kemi Badenoch and not even you, Robert Jenrick.
Well, look, Kemi Badenoch is the leader of our party. I'm right behind her. She's working hard to hold this government to account, and she's landing blows. Look what we've seen recently, where Labour have done this astonishing U-turn on the winter fuel payment, which was taking away money from some of the poorest pensioners in our society. That is what Kemi is doing. We know it's going to be a hard road ahead, but if we actually bring forward serious answers to the challenges this country faces, not get into bed with Keir Starmer on hiking welfare and taking thousands of pounds from savers and handing it to people so they can have their third, fourth and fifth child, I believe over time we can win back the trust and the confidence of the British public.
All right. Robert Jenrick, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Well, I'm going to put all that to Darren Grimes, previously of this parish, now a Reform councillor and maybe even a candidate to become a Reform MP one day. We'll be speaking to him next. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, there's plenty of hot sunshine across most of the Mediterranean, but there are some thunderstorms in places, particularly in southern France. Across the Canary Islands and Madeira, though, there'll be this brisk northerly flow on Monday, bringing in quite a bit of cloud, but sunshine for southern parts of Spain. Here are those thunderstorms across the Alps, southern parts of France, but most of Italy, the Balkans and Greece and Turkey having plenty of hot sunshine and temperatures into the high 20s, and the outlook is for plenty more dry and settled weather.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast every day from 6 a.m.
Eve, very good morning. You commentate on this. This is your subject. What do you think? Why is this happening? Because we're sitting now. I'm at a stage now where all my kids are growing up. Whatever. I don't have to face this thing anymore. But I'm suddenly stopping and going, what? What am I paying this for? Why are we paying this? Why is this going to 750 schools and not all schools?
So this is a pilot run by the Department for Education to look at how this programme can work. It was a manifesto commitment from the Labour Party at the last election, and they're very keen to roll this out nationally, but they're doing this pilot for a short period until July to see how they can do this effectively to ensure that it meets the most children. So really, that's a kind of sensible way of rolling out what is quite a big programme.
It's important to do the pilots and study it and see who it helps and who it doesn't and how expensive it could be if it's rolled out
getting the money
nationally.
to pay for this?
Well, exactly. What do they say about that, Eve? I mean, where are they going to get the money to pay for it?
So they've committed to 30 million towards it. To be honest, we're in a situation as a country where 1/4 of primary school teachers are saying that they regularly spend their own money on feeding kids. That cannot be right. We know that we've got a child poverty problem in this country, and I think it's a reasonably good use of taxpayers' money to be spending it on ensuring that children go to school and they are fed and able to learn.
Well, I just look and I think the basic primary parental responsibility is to look after your children, to feed your children. And I sit and scratch my head and say, of all the things that we can do as parents, all the things we can spend money on, are you telling me that you can't give your kid a bit of toast and a cup of tea in the morning?
GB News, the People's Channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Nigel is back.
Good evening.
Unfiltered.
Are these proposals bold enough?
Uncompromising.
Will it bring growth?
Unmissable.
We as a country are brilliant.
Nigel Farage returns this Tuesday from 7 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The Reform UK councillor and deputy leader of Durham County Council, Darren Grimes, joins me now. Darren, lovely to see you this morning. Now, I don't know whether you caught my interview with Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, but he's accused Nigel Farage of getting into bed with Labour, suggesting that in his suggestion that he wants to end that two-child benefit cap, he's actually now become a proponent of Corbynista politics.
Look, do you know what? I will come to that, but I'm not going to take any lectures, frankly, from a Tory who's been there since the Cameron years, right? Stood by as a minister through several portfolios, when actually the Tories' idea for solving our demographic issues or family policy was to import millions through mass migration. And look how that's worked out. You know, you see in your good paper just this week, Camilla, that benefits claims by foreign nationals have doubled to a nearly £1 billion a month, £1 billion. That's their brilliant demographic strategy, from 461 million to 941 million in just 3 years. And that happened under their watch, under the Boris wave of mass migration. That was their solution. So yeah, on the idea that we're suddenly some form of bleeding heart liberal or even socialists, I've had this put to me. Just last week, I was on another broadcaster, Camilla, and it was put to me that I'm a fascist. Now I'm a socialist. It seems people can't make up how they want to pigeonhole the Reform Party. And it's because we stand for one thing and one thing only, and that's the national interest, for common sense. The fact of the matter is here, Labour could lift 350,000 kids out of relative poverty tomorrow by scrapping the two-child benefit cap, but they won't. They'd rather keep this policy in place whilst lecturing everybody else about compassion and social justice. But if you come over here, as over 1,000 people just did yesterday, you come over here in a boat illegally, you'll get given absolutely everything for free.
Yes.
But if you have 3 children, Camilla, and you end up in a nasty divorce, and I've been there, I've known my family go through similar circumstance, and you end up being punished as a 3rd child. Do you think that's fair, right, or just? I certainly don't.
I take your point. I take your point on compassionate politics. But this is the reality of the situation. And do you know what? The British public aren't with Reform or Nigel Farage or you on this. 6 in 10 support the two-child benefit cap. Why? Because the benefit bill has gone up exponentially over the course of the last decade. It's up by £86 billion. You look at the pie chart of what happens to every pound that taxpayers earn, 31.8% goes on welfare. That's 10% more than all of the money we pay towards the NHS. It's totally unsustainable. It doesn't make political sense. I get the idea of supporting family-friendly tax policies. I get that. But the public isn't behind you. Most working-class people, by the way, think the cap should be in place because they're suspicious of people having children and gaming the system.
Absolutely. But what I would say to that is, Camilla, look at the other stats for Britain's birth rate, for example, 1.4 children per woman. I mean, we're on the path here to demographic extinction. The replacement rate has to be 2.1, which means obviously that we're not producing enough children to actually maintain our population. So I would say to people in a heartfelt plea, this isn't about statistics. This isn't about being a benefit state. And I agree, the benefits bill itself ought to be reformed. Of course it should. But other countries are going hell for leather on this. Hungary restructured their entire economy around families. Japan quadrupled family formation, spending rather on family formation. South Korea threw $200 billion at the problem. We've got to do something about this, because whilst we're sitting here in British families today, they could disappear from tomorrow. We can't accept that decline here is inevitable, because the solution from Labour and the Tories would be mass migration, Camilla, and we simply don't want that.
The thing about immigrants is they do tend to have more children. You're worried about the population of the UK. Why aren't you happy about people coming to this country, settling here, getting British citizenship and having loads of children?
Because I care about my own first, ultimately, right? I care about the people here. I care about the fact that there is a massive rank hypocrisy whilst the Labour Party are spending 4 to 5 billion quid on asylum seekers, so-called asylum seekers, whilst we're arguing here about scraps like the winter fuel payment and the 2-child benefit cap, right, which would amount to about a similar amount of cash. So the fact of the matter is we are not getting our priorities right, and we are choosing to prioritise foreigners over the British public. And I don't think that's where the British public are actually at either.
But are the British public in favour of big government spending plans like those that Reform have come out with this week? I've spoken to Andrew Lillico. He, as you know, he's a fair-minded economist. He looks very much at kind of parties on the right and looks at what they are planning to spend. And he's basically saying that we're now in an era where it doesn't matter whether you're Reform or Labour, it's all about high tax and spend. This isn't the Thatcherism that a lot of your supporters will be calling for.
No, so the policies would work hand in hand. So yes, we prioritise the British families expanding and having more kids, or even just getting started altogether. I hear so many people, I'm in County Durham, house prices are not as high as the rest of the country, but people struggle to get on the housing ladder, even up here. What chance do young families have? That's why we're not having children. So we work on a multi-policy front, which actually says, taxes are too high. They are not allowing people to actually earn enough money to have start a family. Net zero is a misery in the country. Factories are closing at a rate of knots. You've got Nissan and Sunderland talking about leaving, which would be a hammer blow for the northeast economy. So we work with it is a multi-policy approach, Camilla, where yes, you have a benefit prioritisation of British families, but also you get rid of the absolutely insane policy agenda, which is bankrupting Britain and its families.
All right, Darren Grimes, thank you very, very much indeed for joining me this morning. Well, coming up next on GB News is Sunday with Michael Portillo, but Angela Rippon is in the hot seat. Angela, what's coming up on today's show?
Good morning, Camilla. Well, as always, we've got a very full and varied programme. Everything from Jane Austen to British tomatoes, the bombing of Dresden to Welsh Eisteddfods, and I hope that you'll all be able to stay with us.
All right, brilliant. Looking forward to that, Angela. Angela's up at 11. As ever, I am back next week at 9:30 for more fun and frolics with politicians. But before that, there's a little break, and then you'll be able to tune into the 11 o'clock show. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
It's the final week to see how you could be our biggest winner yet, touring in this stylish Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. This brand new 2025 model comes complete with kitchen and bathroom areas and enough space to comfortably sleep a family of 4. We'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to add a few of your favourite things. Don't miss out as lines close on the 6th of June. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
please bring us up to date.
Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news.